All right. Welcome, everyone. This is great. Is it 6 o'clock? Yes, right on time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Susan Cushman is here, and I would like to introduce her. And Susan's an author of 3 books, Friends of the Library, which we just read, which I love, by the way, Cherry Bomb and Tangles and Plaques, a mother and daughter face Alzheimer's. She's the editor of 3 anthologies, Southern Writers on Writing, A Second Blooming, Becoming the Women We Are Meant to Be, and the Pulpwood Queens Celebrate 20 Years, which we've all read also. 5 of her books have been chosen as Pulpwood Queens selections. Susan has served as speaker or panelist at over a dozen literary festivals, conferences, workshops, and retreats over the past 10 years. She's a native of Jackson, Mississippi, and Susan has lived in Memphis since 1988 with her husband, Bill. They will celebrate their 50th anniversary in June, and they have 3 grown children and 4 granddaughters. Welcome, Susan, to our Beaufort.
Thank you. Great to be
Pulpwood
here.
Queens.
Beautiful backdrop.
Thank you. I wish I was really there. I wish I was really there. I love South Carolina and Beaufort and Charleston.
We
This
wish
is the
you were
next
here.
best thing. So great to be with you. Thank you. Thank you. So
We would like
Friends
to.
of the Library is my 5th of 6 books. Now, do you want me to just talk a little bit before you ask questions?
Sure. Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So I never thought I would. Okay. I never thought I would write short stories because I really didn't need short stories very much. I just sort of accidentally found myself in this genre. You know, I read an article in the Huffington Post at one point that said every author should have a band so that when you hear a name, Susan Cushman, you either think literary fiction or short stories or crime drama or romance or some lane that this author writes in, but that's not me. My 6 published books are in 4 different genres. So, but that's, you know, that's my life too. I'm diverse. I read a lot of different things. So the fact that I wrote 10 short stories was a big surprise to me, the way it happened. I've written a memoir, as Char mentioned, Tangles and Plaques. A mother and daughter face Alzheimer's. My mother passed away from Alzheimer's in 2016. And this was 8 years of blog posts about my relationship with her that I put together into a book. And then Cherry Bomb, my novel, and then Friends of the Library. Then the others were anthologies that I edited, which were a whole lot of fun. And of course, Jonathan helped me with the Pulpwood Queens one, which had 67 essays in it. That's a big one. So anyway, my publisher for Cherry Bomb, my novel, is from Starkville, Mississippi. And he's also a writer, journalist, and he knew people in the libraries in about 5 small towns in North Mississippi. So when Cherry Bomb came out and said, I want you to go on a book tour to these libraries in these small towns in Mississippi talking about your book. And I was like, why? I said, I'm going to have to drive a lot of miles. There'll hardly be anybody there. They won't buy many books. I'd rather use my time going to the big sexy bookstores and book festivals and all of that kind of stuff. And he said, no, I really want you to do this. And I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I headed out and I did research on each town before I got there. Because I went to college in Oxford at Ole Miss. I had never been to most of these towns like Eureka, West Point, Pontotoc. I'd never been to them. So I read a little of the history before I made the drives, and I was instantly hooked. I was fascinated.
Well, Char is back, and we've lost Susan.
We've lost Susan. You know, it is.
Here. I'm here.
And Rosemary, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Rosemary.
Yay!
Yeah.
I had to put earplugs in.
What?
I had to put earplugs in. And I don't know if it'll or not.
Oh, you know what? I bet you Lisa Devlin's trying to get in too.
Okay, I can hear you very.
But that's good. Char, say something else.
Let's give Susan a
Hello.
minute to rejoin here.
Yeah, it's every, you know, our voices are breaking up also, which is really difficult to hear.
I hear you now.
Okay.
Clearly.
Yeah. Susan's coming back in.
Oh, good.
There she is.
Hey, I had to get on my phone. I got kicked off. I'm so sorry, guys.
Well,
It's all right.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, let me
Yeah.
set up my little phone stand here. And
I can use a phone stand.
okay. All right, now, does this work okay? We'll just continue this way. And I'll just hope that I don't run out of juice because I just plugged it in. Wait, I can plug it in. Sorry.
Okay.
So goes technology.
Right. What does your phone stand look like?
Uh-oh, hold on. I don't know what's happening here.
We can still hear you, Susan, but the camera feed switched off. There you are.
My phone
Yep.
stand, I can't really, I don't know how to show. Yeah, I guess I can show you this way. It's just a little thing like this.
Oh, that's nice. I need one of those.
I got it online. Anyway, so I was talking about going to these little towns in Mississippi, and I would get to each library, and there were often friends of the library groups that were meeting, and there would be big crowds. There would be 15, 20, 25. One had 50 people,
Wow.
which I think some of it speaks to the fact that there's not as much to do in the small towns. You know? But a lot of it is, a lot of the people that came are retired school teachers, retired college professors, really well-read people, and they were great at discussing, you know, and so that made it really, really fun. I really enjoyed it a lot. So I did the first 5 towns that my publisher had sent me to, and then I thought, this is so much fun, I'm going to find 5 more towns. I'm going to find more towns and keep going. And as I was doing that, I had the idea to write the book. So I found 5 more towns and, you know, contacted the libraries and told them what I was doing and got events. So eventually I ended up at 10 towns and wrote short stories really quickly. Like I wrote all the stories in about 3 months. And it had taken me 6 or 7 years to write the novel. So, you know, it was just really fun.
Yes.
I enjoyed it. And if y'all read the book, you probably read that little quote I put from William Faulkner in the back. Because, this is what happened to me. I had friends who have said, you know, our characters just take on a life of their own when we write. And I've always gone, that's ridiculous. You know, I control my characters. I had never had that happen until I was writing these stories. And here's what Faulkner said. It begins with the character, usually. Once he's on his feet and begins to move, all I can do is trot along behind him with a paper and pencil, trying to keep up long enough to put down what he says and does. That's how I felt about these characters. You know, in each town, I would get the idea either for the plot or for the character. And then I would just start writing, and the story just happened. It was great fun. So I now love short stories. I now have a new genre that I love. I may write some more. And they're quicker to write, you know, because the narrative arc is so much shorter than with the novel. They're not as likely to sag in the middle.
Right.
Someone driving in a car?
I am.
Well, that's a new one.
Just left work. I'm sorry to join so late.
No, I think it's awesome. I love it. Book club on wheels.
Well, we have a happy hour, and sometimes Lisa's driving in the car on her way home.
There you go. There you go. Whatever you can make works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of, I don't know where I was going with that. That's how the book came about. So,
well, you know, I have a question.
Okay.
How are you managing to make your hair look so fabulous?
I just washed it. Okay, this is really scary. I cut my own bangs the other day.
Yes.
had not done that in years, and they look kind of like little girl bangs, just straight
No, they
across.
look good. They look good.
And my hair needed a haircut when the pandemic started, so I don't know. I just washed it. Thank you.
It looks great because it's a big concern of all of us right now.
Exactly. That and our nails. My toenails are really long. They're a bit harder to reach than your fingernails.
That is true.
Oh, what trick about that?
Oh man. So, does anybody? I have some questions that were sent by email. Char, were you going to ask me some of these, or John?
Well, actually, Jonathan has the questions.
Okay,
Well, I sent them to Susan, so Susan now has the questions.
I have them. Do y'all want me to address them?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sure.
all right. I will. The first one's kind of long, but I love it. I don't know who wrote it. You'll have to fess up. It's about synchronicity. Who wrote about that?
Let's see.
Okay, all right. I like some Jungian stuff myself, so I liked this question. Is synchronicity a word you use? Assuming these stories are autobiographical in nature, I would say in many instances you were in the right place at the right time to help someone. By the way, somebody's got some big noise. It may be the lady driving the car.
Yeah, maybe I can mute myself.
Yeah, just for now. Yeah, that's
Sure.
better. Thank you. I'm sorry. And many people call this serendipity, which it certainly is, but more than that, synchronicity is when we are aware enough of our current situations and know that coincidences are meaningful. They are meant to happen. You are the conduit that is needed to give this situation the positive outcome it needs. Serendipity is just more a pleasant surprise or stroke of luck. This takes courage to act on circumstances where you think you may be of help. Many people would not interfere, thinking it's not their business. But I see time and again, a woman puts herself into the situation to try and bring people together. Being able to recognize a troubled situation, being in tune with the universe, if you will, a Jungian principle, and then having the resolve to act on it. This is a true gift. I cannot tell you how excited I was to read that questions. And here's why. They say you shouldn't read your reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, but of course I do. And I've actually been kind of entertained by some of the negative reviews. And one of them just is that it was just totally unrealistic that Adele would get so involved in the lives of these people that she just met. You know, and others said, oh, it's just too much like Touched by an Angel or a Hallmark thing. It's just not believable. But I'm very much like Adele, and I do insert myself into the lives of others, sometimes not asked. I learn my lessons if I'm not wanted. But these are really not at all autobiographical stories. The stories, nothing like them, now the stories themselves and the characters are completely fiction. What's autobiographical is the issues, because every issue dealt with has touched my life personally. So, you know, and I do have a nature of wanting to jump in and help. I mean, Adele is really nosy. She really gets in there. You know, the first story in Eupora with the old lady in the Victorian house with Francine and Odell, and she keeps pushing Francine and saying, you might think that I'm getting up in your business, and I guess I am, you know. So I can tend to be that way, but hopefully it is a gift and not an annoyance. Thank you for writing that.
That's a good question.
Yeah. So,
You know, what struck me is that I was going to be a librarian years ago, and I still had little kids. I had a degree in something else, and I thought I love to read, and I want to go work at a library. And of course, we have a Friends of the Library. But what struck me, and maybe it's just because, and the people in our group would be shocked by this, but I was surprised that you would go to lunch with people after the meeting.
Well, it varied with each group. Okay. Factually, not every library I went to had a Friends of the Library organized group. Some just called it Lunch with the Author, and they served lunch at the meeting.
Right. Right.
Some were actual friends of the law. The ones that didn't serve lunch, a couple of times I would join somebody for lunch. But the story you're thinking about, where I went to lunch with those two ladies in Starkville, that didn't happen.
Right.
No, that didn't happen at all.
I wish that were true, but I would go to lunch with you, but I just thought, I just can't imagine that you get to go with this, this fabulous speaker person. You're gonna say, hey, could you hang out with me some more?
No. Yeah. But that really, I'm pretty sure I didn't go to lunch with anybody, but because we had lunch at almost every library.
Yes. Or coffee.
The same little things: pimento cheese or chicken salad on white bread, cut into little triangles with the crust cut off.
Right.
Jello salad and potato chips, because this was the comfort food of my childhood in Mississippi. Sure. And so I went back, and they were still doing that, in all of those small towns. They still were.
Well, they still do it in Beaufort, South Carolina, too.
Well, that's a small southern town as well.
It's all good. And crab, I think.
Yeah. We didn't have crab growing up in Mississippi. I didn't have that until I was an adult. But so, like I said, some people criticized the book for being too sweet. Like The Touch by an Angel, too Hallmark. And I laughed. I said, Hallmark can come and buy these stories any day if they want. I'll be very happy. And I've written a lot of dark stuff. My novel had a lot of dark stuff in it. And these are serious issues, but I just wanted them to have happy endings. That's not really usually my nature. It just must have been my mindset during the time I was writing them.
Yes.
That I wanted them to have happy endings.
Well, it's good for now, too, isn't it? We're all isolated. We could use some happy endings.
We did. Speaking of that, one of the questions, a short question, we'll see who wrote this. What impact has the coronavirus pandemic had on your creativity? Have you had more or less time to write during the social isolation? Who sent that question? Anybody know?
Wasn't me.
No?
Dana. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Dana. Thank you. Well, this is a really interesting question. The answer is no, I've not had more time, and here's why. My husband is a physician. He's 71 years old. He works at the VA Medical Center. So a month ago, he got a cough. The cough would not go away. Coughing. Right. So no fever, no other symptoms, but he stayed home from work for 3 weeks, worked from home, during which time he got a COVID test. Thank God it was negative. But he was here 24/7 for 3 weeks. So no, I didn't do anything creative during that time. Thankfully, even though my book tour for Friends of the Library, my physical book tour is over, thankfully have plenty of things to do, like Zoom meetings, Facebook meetings, and I have several author friends who have sent me manuscripts and asked me to read them to write blurbs. So, and I do have one of the questions said, what's your current writing project? So this kind of ties into that. I have a collection of personal essays. I've titled it Pilgrim Interrupted. And so I am querying presses for it right now. So it's out to 1 academic press and 4 independent presses that I've queried right now that are reading. So if I get a bite from one of those, I'm suddenly going to be busy, dealing with a new manuscript. And I have a friend who's an artist who lives in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. And we are collaborating on a new project with her artwork and my writing. And so it's going very slowly. We're approaching it just kind of for fun, but if it turns out good, we will try to get it published. So neither of those are the kind of thing that takes uninterrupted concentration. There's no way I could start a novel right now. I need hours of alone time every day to do something like that, Now, my husband did go back to work last week, but I just, haven't quite dived into anything new. Now, I just did something fun. This ties into the question. Lee Smith, the author Lee Smith, one of my favorite writers, just did a Zoom meeting for her new novella, Blue Marlin. And so as she was talking about her novella, I asked, when she wrote the story, was she thinking of a novella? Was she thinking of a novel and just didn't get there? Was she thinking of a short story and it just went too long? Why a novella? And she said she thought it would be a short story. And then it just kept going and going and going. And it just felt right at the size it was, so it's a novella. And it was fun for me to hear that because, the story in Friends of the Library about John and Mary Margaret, the mixed race couple on the Ole Miss campus? I've had several people say, why don't you expand that into a novel? And I don't know that it's got enough or I've got enough in me to make it a novel, but I'm going to start expanding it and just see how long it goes. And if it gets to 10 or 20,000 words, it's a novella. We'll see what happens.
That's right.
Yeah, with that. So it's so important to me to be in touch with other writers. And Lee and I became friends about 10 years ago. And she's such an inspiration to me. And just that brief encounter with her at the Zoom meeting today may have really stimulated me on another project.
Yes, I was struck by that. My parents' names are John and Margaret Mary.
Margaret Mary, not Mary Margaret. Yeah.
Yes. Only they were Irish, so
yeah.
they didn't have that. They had other issues.
So if I turn that into a novella, what should I title it?
Oh gosh, remember Janice Ian?
Who?
Janice Ian.
Singer. Yeah.
And she wrote a story about, I'm just brainstorming here, but she wrote a song about, Char, do you remember? The one, it was about a mixed race.
No, I don't.
Oh. Society's Child. It's called Society's Child.
Society's Child. Okay. Well, y'all keep brainstorming and send me any more ideas because I don't think I just would want to call it John and Mary Margaret. All by itself. Well, as a chapter in a book, that's fine.
Sure.
But all by itself, I think it's going to need something more. I don't know.
Sure.
But I'm going to start working on it because, Do what?
What, Brenda?
Second chance meeting or something.
Yes.
Meeting.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Titles are fun. I love titles. I can spend forever, thinking up titles. Friends of the Library was a very easy title because it gave me a great hook, to go. I've spoken at over 25 libraries in 7 states since the book came out last August. And, on the one hand, that's great. That's a huge audience. On the other hand, it doesn't sell a lot of books because people at libraries don't often buy a whole lot of books. They don't have a big budget. So a lot of people would come to the meeting. There might be 30 people at the meeting and only 5 or so would buy a book, maybe 10. And I would ask the librarian, what's the deal? And she said, oh, they'll all wait and check it out from the library. Okay, well, that makes sense.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I bought your book twice. Because because yesterday I'm a very fast reader, and yesterday I was I got to read this book, and Kindle would not download it. So I went onto my husband's Kindle. I read it on a Kindle app on my phone. It said no, and even the sample it wouldn't download. So then I wrote to Kindle. Yeah, and I said, okay, what's the problem? Why won't this download? And they said, okay, for $5, I'll tell you. I'm like, no. So then I just, eventually it showed up. So that was good.
That's weird, yeah.
But I bought one for my husband's Kindle, and so I'm a twofer.
Yeah. Well, the main library here in Memphis, when I spoke there, they bought 10 copies. So that was nice just to put in the library,
Yes,
and
yes.
I'm not doing this for the money. And I'm doing it for the connections.
Yes.
And so I'm going back to those 10 small towns. I've been back to 8 of them so far, and going back with a story that was inspired by by them, which is a lot of fun. Oh, I have a funny story about that. Y'all remember the story set in Pontotoc about the man playing the piano?
Yes.
And then he reconnected with the woman in Oxford, late life romance they had.
Right.
Yeah.
So, when I talked back to the librarian at Pontotoc and I said, guess what? When I visited with y'all last time, I wrote a short story about, that was inspired by that visit, and it's part of a book Friends of the Library. I'd love to come and speak with y'all about it. She said, great. And I said, and by the way, Gerald Waldrop, the delightful man that was playing the piano, inspired the main character in this book. I can't wait to show it to him. And she said, I'm so sorry he passed away last year. So that part was just broke my heart. And then the next thing she said, whoa, she said, well, we'll be sure and invite his wife. And I went, oh, wait, he's married? Oh, no, we need to be sure she knows that this was totally fiction, because I have him having this late life romance with an old flame in Oxford.
Good Lord.
It turned out she did not come to the meeting. I was spared that embarrassment. Anyway, yeah, so that was just a funny thing about that one. So, okay, let's see. You want me to read another question?
Sure. I have a question.
Okay,
So my sister writes stories from our family, and we have a lot of stories in my family, and she's a very good writer. But I was thinking, so you talked about in one of the short stories about going to a retreat, and then people criticize your writing and give you notes. Is that really painful?
It can be. It depends on the chemistry of the group. When I first started writing, I went to a lot of workshops where you turn in 10 or 15 pages of your manuscript. Everybody reads each other's. They're led by people in the MFA program. The most of them I went to were in Oxford, where Ole Miss is. So you're bearing your soul. You're sharing your story. You're listening to feedback from others. But the good news is everybody there is in the same boat. Everybody has turned in their stuff. Everybody. So if you get a good spirited group, which most of the time I did, everybody's cheering for everybody to become a better writer. So instead of saying, well, that really sucked, I hated that character so-and-so, people would give helpful, encouraging feedback for the most part.
That's nice.
Yeah, so that's what happens in those kind. So that's the story set in Oxford about Avery, the young man who was adopted.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that very much was based on my experience at the same workshop I had Avery go to, the Yaknabatawfa Summer Writers Workshop.
Yes.
That was very much based on that. Yeah. And Avery was based on both of my sons. So all three of my children are adopted. I told you all of these touch me personally. They're all three adopted. And one of them has written fantasy novels and has tried to find his birth mom. And, he has had a lot of struggles from being separated from his birth mom. So that kind of inspired Avery, a little bit there. And so.
Has he done the 23andMe?
Well, I have two sons that are adopted. So the oldest one is not interested in looking anything up.
Right.
And he is white, and he's from Mississippi, and we adopted him as a baby, and he's 42. Jason is from South Korea, and I don't know if he's done that or not, but he knows who his birth mother is. He went to Korea to meet her.
Oh, nice.
And she refused to meet him. This was when he was 24, and he's 38. And it really put him into a severe depression, and he fought for college. It was just, hard. But once he got married and had two girls of his own, he's healed a lot from all of that. So that's adoption. That's my part of that. My mother had Alzheimer's. So the story of John and Mary Margaret, later on, their spouses have Alzheimer's. Let's see. In the first story, Francine was an alcoholic.
Right.
Well, I quit drinking 2.5 years ago, so I could relate a lot to her struggle. The mixed race couple, my daughter, who is also from South Korea, her husband is black, and even though they dated and married in the 2000s, not in the 1960s, they still experience some prejudice.
Sure.
They still do. So let's see, that's that issue. I'm trying to think what the issues. Oh, cancer, the little girl with cancer.
Right.
So I'm a cancer survivor. And the weeping icon and all of that, I'm Orthodox, and I painted icons for a number of years.
Wow.
And I have seen weeping icons in person. So that, that a lot of that came from my life.
So are you Greek? Are you Greek Orthodox?
No, we are part of the Antiochian Orthodox
Okay.
jurisdiction. There's 5 jurisdictions. Greek is one. Antiochian is one. There's Russian. There's Romanian. You know, they're from the different parts of the world. Yeah. So I painted icons for a number of years. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
most of the stories have something. The one in Meridian with the ghost. Well, my mother is from Meridian, and so you know but my grandparents are buried in that cemetery where the queen of the ghosts is buried.
Oh,
I mean, not the ghosts. I mean, the gypsies. I'm sorry, I'm getting the ghosts and the gypsies mixed up. Yeah, so she's buried in that. My grandparents are buried in that cemetery. And when I was a little girl, I spent 2 weeks every summer with my grandmother. I was in Jackson, Mississippi, and they were in Meridian. And I would go over there, and she worked in that tall building where the ghost was. So, you know, a lot of that comes from my life. But then the stories really are fictional. You know? They really, so it's just fun.
I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Go, no, please, Char.
Okay, did you edit any stories out of the book?
Nope, these were the 10 that went in, and they all made it. John Kohler, who published it, who's in Virginia Beach, his editor, John Caccaro, they both read it. And when I first started working with John, this was such a delight. He just said, I loved these stories and they don't need much work. Well, of course,
nice.
For a writer to hear that, I mean,
Nice.
My novel needed a ton of work. So it was fun. And I think some of that is because short stories are just easier. Because they're self-contained, you know, in 20 pages, you've got the whole plot.
Right.
So, you know, so no, there weren't any additional ones. Somebody asked a question about would I add on to it? Would I have a follow-up? And the thing is, I don't know. I would almost feel like I would need to go to 10 more towns. Like I didn't even go to the Mississippi Delta, to Greenwood and Indianola and Greenville and all that area. There's Cleveland. There's a great area there, but you know, I don't know. I kind of feel like it's done. I may write some more short stories, but I kind of feel like the Friends of the Library is probably done. Yeah, probably so. Yeah.
Right.
All right, I'll read another question.
Okay.
All right, we'll see who wrote this one. Do y'all have a librarian among you?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay, maybe she sent this. She said, I appreciate the many literary references that are now on my reading list. This was such an engaging read, and I hope there will be a volume 2, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure you could fill us in on what since has happened to many of these characters. Oh, this isn't the question I thought a librarian wrote. That's another one. Anyway, she says, the Miss Mississippi chapter I felt could also be called Vicksburg, Melinda, and Miss Mississippi. So this isn't the librarian question, but I kind of already addressed that I don't know that I'll add more to it. I will say about the Mississippi, the Vicksburg one, is I didn't actually go to the library there because their Friends of the Library group was defunct. And so I went to a small independent bookstore called Lorelei, this great bookstore. And that's where I did my event there. But when I was in town for it, the Miss Mississippi pageant happened to be going on at the time I was in town. And I grew up glued to that every year, like every other little girl in Miss Mississippi did. And of course, we had a ton of Miss Mississippi winners that went on to be Miss America, and all that stuff about the swimsuit competition and body image and the emphasis and all that. I just felt like that needed to be addressed.
Right.
So that story and the story set in Starkville had the sexual abuse stories in them and eating disorders. Right. And so that's something else I experienced starting when I was 5 years old with my grandfather. And so I've struggled all my life with the eating disorders and the body image stuff and all of that. So I touched on that in 2 of the stories, you know, 2 there. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I told you my sister, the writer.
Yeah.
The same thing happened to her with my grandfather.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have that I know of eating disorder, but I'd say she's extremely sensitive, which that's probably a genetic thing. So,
Yeah.
and she turned out like just like you did. She turned out fine, but you know, it's one of those things, right?
Well, yeah, and there's a lot more to it with me as well. My mother was verbally and emotionally abusive to me my whole life, constantly watching what I eat and telling me I was fat all the time and criticizing the way I looked all the time.
Right.
So by junior high school, I was bulimic. And so, you know, it was that probably as much or more than my grandfather. And then in my early 20s, I had another experience with someone that was abusive, not my husband. Anyway, so
let's just call him the idiot. With an idiot.
Yeah, but you know, these are very real issues for a lot of people. So
yes. Well, and it's actually really common. My mother-in-law was anorexic and bulimic. And there's a picture of her when she's about 5 years old. And if she doesn't look seductive, and I think obviously something happened to her. And she, you know, I think when you, unlike you, when you like hide things, you kind of crack up. And so she cracked up kind of when she's in her 50s, where she couldn't hold it together anymore.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Well, she was a really good mother-in-law.
Well,
she was really good.
Does anyone else have any more questions?
I do have the question that I think the librarian wrote, if y'all want me to read that.
Sure.
Okay, who's the librarian?
Brenda.
Okay, see if this is her question. It sounds like the term Friends of the Library can mean different things. In Mississippi, it sounds like these are book lovers that get together for lunch. We call these book clubs here. Friends of the Library are organizations. And she goes on, which I kind of defined the difference in that earlier. And then she says, we have a large workroom upstairs in the library where book donations are sorted. Rare books are sold online through eBay and other sources. Some are put in the book sale room in the library. The rest are boxed by genre and stacked for the annual book sale at Waterfront Park. So this is so true. And I had one thing I got to do that was a lot of fun when I went on my tour this year was in New Orleans, at a library in New Orleans, as well as the main library in Memphis. I got to go and speak about my book during an annual book sale. So it was fun because people were coming and going at the book sale and listening to me talk about Friends of the Library. So, you know, that was a really fun connection. Yeah. So
who wrote that?
I don't know. Did Brenda say it was her?
I think that's Brenda's question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love the title though, because it's all encompassing. It's not just a group, the Friends of the Library. And they come together to discuss books, and I just think it's a great title.
Thank you. Well, you know, the funny thing happened when I was working with John Kohler, my publisher. He can be kind of a tease, like he can joke with you and you don't know if he's serious or not. And early on, he said, I am not crazy about the title. He said this in an email. He said, I'm thinking something like Adele Covington goes on a book tour. I just freaked out when I read that. And I wrote back and I said, this is a deal breaker. That is the most ridiculous title I've ever heard. And it's got to be Friends of the Library. And then he wrote back and he said, I was just kidding. Oh, man, that was funny. They were great to work with for the cover. I love what they did with the cover. And y'all have all seen it, but what Color Books does is they narrow down the choices to a couple of choices after their graphic designers put some together. They put it up on their website and get readers to vote, and that just kind of creates interest in the book. But I was just saying, I want this cover. I love this cover, and fortunately, it did get voted too. You know, it got voted as the favorite cover. So, yeah,
it is a good cover. It's a good cover.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question that wasn't sent in to email?
Susan, would you say a little bit about what you're doing with the Pulpwood Queens and the Pulpwood Academy? That's coming up pretty soon too, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Brooklyn. Now I'm sitting here drawing a blank on Brooklyn's last name. Anyway, she's helping Kathy. She's kind of taken over a lot of Kathy's roles in the Pulpwood Queen organization, and she has started a Facebook group called Pulpwood Academy. I hope all of y'all will join it on Facebook. And so this Thursday night at 7 o'clock, I'm going to do a Facebook Live event there. So it'll probably be kind of like what we're doing now, only if you're on there, you won't be speaking. You'll be typing in your questions. And they did an interview with me and put it up a couple of weeks ago. So that was a lot of fun. And Kathy also has partnered with the Breathless Bubbles and Wines people. And on their Facebook group, I was the host all last week, week before last. So I had a chance to talk about Friends of the Library and chat with people during that time as well. Now, I have not been able to go to any events for the anthology, the Pulpwood Queens Celebrate 20 Years, which I edited with Jonathan's help. It just, the timing of when it came out, it just didn't work. And I was still on tour for Friends in January. I got shingles in February and was sick for a month. And then the pandemic started in March. So, yeah, Jonathan, you've done some events for the Pulpwood Queens Celebrate 20 Years, right?
Well, I spoke to this very club that we're in right now about it. When was that, Char? That was January. I think we
Yes.
did that.
Yeah.
Yes. That's really all I've done so far. We'd certainly love to have a group of panelists at the Conroy Center at some point.
Yeah.
And we had talked about, of course, doing something when the great cancellations began. We were supposed to do something with you for the South Carolina Friends of the Library and several of the
Right.
Yeah. That was my biggest disappointment. My book tour was almost over. I had 2 or 3 things left for April, and one of them was the thing I was most excited about it all, and that was the Friends of the Libraries of South Carolina. They're in Beaufort, and you know, I was just so excited about that. And I don't know if there's any chance they would reschedule that later, or if that's just an annual thing. I don't know.
There is. We're hoping to reschedule and attach it to the front end of the Pat Conroy Literary Festival this fall and make it all one thing. I don't know that that will be possible, but that's the conversation right now.
Okay.
That would be
And if that happens,
wonderful.
Susan, we'd love to have you in Beaufort this fall for that.
Yeah, that would be great. Depends on when it is. I have something scheduled in October and November that my husband, like I said, he's a physician and he's doing a lot of reading about the pandemic. And he thinks we're in for a lot longer haul than some people think. We're supposed to go with 2 other couples to Italy for a week in October. And our son is getting married in November, our oldest son, in New Orleans. And we're just hopeful that even those events won't be canceled in October and November. You know, we'll see. And now that they're letting people get out and do more, I'm sorry, but I just couldn't disagree with that more strongly. Tennessee and South Carolina.
We all agree.
Tennessee and South Carolina are 2 of the 3 states that are doing it right now.
You know, go ahead and open it. Doesn't mean I'm going to go anywhere.
I'm not either. We definitely are not.
Yeah. And my nephew's a doc in Baltimore, and he said that even when everything opens up, he said, my family is staying in for 2 more weeks.
Right.
You know,
See how
what
it
do you
goes.
do? It's the unknown.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, my husband's gone back to work, but he does a lot of academic medicine, a lot of research. So he only sees patients right now 1 day a week at the VA. And because he deals with hypertension, with high blood pressure primarily, he is seeing them. He's talking to them on the phone, and they're doing blood pressures at home, and he's talking to them and changing their meds and that sort of thing. He's not seeing them in person right now.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and fortunately at the VA where he works, there are less than a dozen cases of COVID right now, and no one has died there from it. So
good.
I
That's
know
good.
it's almost like he's in a little bubble there.
Good. I'm glad.
I know we're being careful. And our kids live in Louisiana, Colorado, and Arizona, and they're all working from home. Well, our son's not. He flies medevac helicopters.
Oh,
Out of New Orleans.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, but our kids out west are all in IT, and they're all working from home while they have all our 4 granddaughters, 2 in each home. But, thank God, they have homes and jobs and food and,
Do you have, I have 2 grandchildren in Washington, D.C., and they told me to do it's called Facebook Portal. And you buy this thing. Oh my gosh. So it hooks up to your television. So it hooks up to the 55-inch screen television. My grandkids and my son and daughter-in-law have it. And so I see them on the 55-inch screen. Plus, I can read them stories, and it does all the little filter things. So you do the 3 little pigs, and, you know, like then you're wearing the screen makes it look like you're wearing the pig thing. My grandkids love it. And then they do it. Then they tell the story wearing the goofy little. It's fun.
Well, I think our kids must have it on their end, because when we FaceTime with them, we can see their whole room with all the.
Yes, they have it. That's right.
And we're just on smaller gadgets. Yes. I don't know. Our big screen TV is not that smart right now, but we'll think about it.
It's not a smart TV. It has the HDMI portal, and then you just plug it into the portal, and bada boom.
We might look into it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Does anyone have questions they would like to ask? Any more questions?
I had both mine answered naturally.
You had both
about creepy icons. You answered that one, and you said, what is the name? I want to know what the name of that book is. That was you said linked sexual abuse with eating disorders, and I'm assuming it's a real book.
No.
Real chapter. Do you remember the name of it?
There was not a real book, and there are plenty of books.
Okay.
When I went to a counselor about a lot of this 20 years ago, is when I first learned I was having addiction issues, and that's when I first learned that there was a connection between the eating disorder and the addiction stuff and the sexual abuse. And there's plenty of literature about it. I mean, all you have to do is Google it. But there was not, if that was a book that I was sharing, that Adele was sharing with the woman in that story, it wasn't a real book. Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's plenty. Yeah, there's plenty of it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Sure, yeah. Anybody else?
Dana or Betty, do you have anything to say? But I see that you're muted. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit, Susan, if you would, about the writing of the icons.
Okay.
I had an acquaintance in Savannah who painted icons, is the way I understood it at that time. And they were so beautiful. It was fascinating. Could you just talk a little more about the icons and your experience with them?
Sure. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk into my dining room where there's a number of icons that I wrote or painted on the wall. So y'all get to see them. So let's see. There's one.
Wow.
That's Archangel Gabriel.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And
Go back to it.
I'll go back to that
on
one.
it.
Yeah, it was too
Stay on
quick.
it a minute.
Okay. That one is, let me get to it.
Wow. That's
Archangel
gorgeous.
Gabriel. Thank you.
Wow.
Gorgeous. I love it.
Then I have a whole wall here. We have what's called an icon corner
Wow. I love it.
where we do prayers. And so that one is the Mother of God with Jesus.
Wow.
And
Beautiful.
I can't quite aim this exactly right. This one, I can't tell if I'm aiming it right, is Mary of Egypt and St. Basil the Great.
Oh my.
Patron saints of myself and my husband. And the one of Mary of Egypt, there's a weeping icon of Mary of Egypt in my novel Cherry Bomb. So that was kind of inspired by that. Okay, it's called writing icons instead of painting, because what you're doing is, the term hagiography means you're writing the life of a saint, like just the story. Hagiography, that's written the life of the saint in words. Iconography is the life of the saint in colors. So you're writing the life of either Christ or Mary or whatever saint in colors. So that's why they call it writing rather than painting. And I started studying it about 20 years ago. at Orthodox monasteries where nuns and others were teaching it. And so then I opened a studio and taught iconography for a number of years, and I did commissioned icons, was really into it. And then I just sort of did a U-turn and said, you know, I really always wanted to write. And I think I kind of backed into doing icons because where I was in my life spiritually, it was a very acceptable thing to do in the Orthodox faith and the church. I mean, I would have been doing abstract art or something secular. And so I said, you know, I don't think I'm really called to keep doing this. And I'm going to write instead. So here I am 6 books later. I'm no longer painting or writing icons, but I still love them very much. I love to write about them. Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Talented.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing this.
Dana, did you have any questions, or Janet?
She answered them. The first 2 questions she answered were mine.
Oh, they were very thoughtful questions. Yeah. Well, somebody wrote this short question. It says, there was the phrase in your introduction, quote, each character comes to me as gifts from a muse. Is muse a general term or more of a specific entity that inspires you? So whose question was that?
That's me.
Okay. Well, I think, you know, it's kind of like what I said earlier, that this never happened to me before, where I really did feel like they just sort of came to me. I don't know. I use the word muse, though some people use it to mean, you know, like a spirit that inspires your writing in general. But it was kind of like each of these characters sort of spoke to me and said, let's write this story. I'll be this person. You know, it was that kind of experience. I don't know if it'll ever happen again, but it was just so much fun. I just loved it. There was never a moment of, oh, this is hard. Oh, I don't know how to do this, or will I ever finish this? And I felt that way a lot writing my novel over many, many years, you know, which is why I haven't started another novel, I think. You know, I'm 69, and since my mother and grandmother both had Alzheimer's, you know, I'm thinking, okay, I wonder how many years I have where I can think enough to write. I better do short projects.
Well, I have to commend you for doing the short stories. To me, I think writing short stories is harder than writing a novel.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Okay.
the entire arc in a short period. I don't know. I have trouble writing short stories.
Yeah. Well, I don't know why. It just happened. If I try it again, maybe I won't find that same experience. I don't know.
I thought it was very good, though. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
All the stories in the whole book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Well, it's a short book. It's a quick read. And, you know, that's good for some people. Yeah.
It was very good. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here tonight.
Oh, yes. I appreciate it. It was great.
We all appreciate it. And
yes.
Anything else anybody needs to say before we close?
No, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you so much.
Susan. Thanks so much.
And thanks for facilitating, Jonathan.
Yes. Thank you, Susan.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Jonathan, for doing this. And welcome to the club.
Thank you. Thank y'all.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.